How does it feel to be adopted? What does it mean to search for your origins? Adoption is a life-altering experience for everyone involved, but for adoptees, the question of identity is never simple. It's a lifelong journey shaped by mystery, longing, and sometimes profound discoveries. I've spent the last 8 years listening to over 250 adopted people from all walks of life and around the world who share their adoption stories. People who lived through, thrived, and merely survived adoption, many of whom dared to search for their biological roots. Some found long-lost family, others uncovered unexpected truths, still others found no answers at all. But all of them shared raw, unfiltered stories of resilience, identity, and self-discovery. Now, their voices come together in my new book, The Adoptee Experience. Inside the cover, you'll find what adoptees experience in their adoptive families, why so many of us feel compelled to search, and the deep emotions that drive us. How fantasies about birth parents shape our expectations before adoption reunion. The role of DNA testing, access to records, and other tools that impact adoptee searches, and the emotional roller coaster of attempting adoption reunions to reconcile the past, whether the journey brings joy, heartbreak, or something in between. The Adoptee Experience isn't just a book, it's a reflection of what it really means to be adopted. If you've ever wondered about your own identity or you want to understand the adoptee journey, this book is for you. Please take a moment to visit whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience. Again, whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience to stay up to date on the book's progress.
We don't know what we're walking into. We don't know how disruptive our questions and our contact are going to be with those folks. And I think I went into the situation kind of unrealistic in that I thought they would open their arms to find us and to have us in their lives. Well, their lives were too complicated.
Who am I?
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 This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and today you're going to hear from Julie from Chicago, Illinois. Julie's story is rare in the world of adoption because she wasn't adopted alone. She and her identical twin sister were placed together. Secure in their sense of family, the twins never sought adoption reunion until health concerns emerged for Julie. Julie describes the initial rejection of her first mother, the misidentification of her birth father, and the eventual softening of the feelings of a mother of twins who finally needed to know that her girls were okay. This is Julie and Jenny's journey. I started my conversation with Julie as I frequently do, curious about how she grew up in her family and in her community as an adoptee. Julie said,
Well, one of the things that sets me apart from most adoptees is I have an identical twin sister, and we were adopted together through Catholic Charities. We were, like most people, my parents' first children, and then they adopted a little boy 2 years later, and then they proceeded to have three of biological children of their own. So I grew up in a very big Irish Catholic family in Chicago, blended family. And it's an interesting twist that the three oldest of us are the adopted kids and the three youngest were not. My parents did, I would say, an excellent job of not drawing any distinctions between any of us. And I'm very close to my twin sister, as you can imagine. It really adds a different aspect to adoption to have been adopted with a full sibling, which is not to say there weren't a lot of musings and stirrings about where we came from and why we were placed for adoption, because we knew nothing. Like so many adoptees from that era, it was closed adoption.
Let's pause for a moment. I would love for you to tell me, you said something very interesting. You said that basically, and to paraphrase, your parents did a wonderful job of not drawing any lines or making any distinctions. Or they were, you alluded to success in parenting, if I read it correctly. What does that mean? How does that look for a parent to be good at that piece of not
Um,
distinguishing between the adoptees and their naturally born children?
yeah, that's a great question. We all had the same reward system, if you would. We had chores, we got an allowance, the same praise and support as far as following our activities, getting us involved in activities, sitting around the dinner table at night. Everybody got to talk about their day. They were very equally involved in what everybody was doing. My youngest sister was born with cataracts. My mom had been exposed to rubella during her pregnancy. So she was special needs, and I think we all centered on making her life more comfortable. That focus on a disabled sibling that changed our family and the way we did business. But that's part of the third book that just came out in February, is talking about how the family dealt with all that and some things that happened afterwards.
Yeah, I saw you have quite a catalog of books. That's really fascinating. And we'll get to that in a moment. I want to focus in a little bit on your unique experience of being a twin in adoption. Twins are unique no matter what in any
Yeah.
family, but you are adopted twins, which is fascinating because, as you, I'm sure, well know, so many adopted people are adopted solo. And in many cases, they don't have anybody to relate to in terms of, especially myself, I was an only child in adoption. And I could see how having a biological twin sibling adopted with you could give you some level of comfort that you are in this family together to the extent that you ever thought about it. Tell me what sets being adopted as a twin apart from being adopted as a singleton apart. How is it different?
Well, I mean, the most easy example to bring up is I never had to wonder who I looked like a lot of adoptees do. I just, would look right over at her and I was seeing almost a mirror image. As you said, we had a really tight bond in the sense that we would go to our room every night and whisper and talk. We shared some of those adoption fantasies that a lot of adoptees talk about. So I had someone to talk to about it. I also always knew that she'd have the same reaction as I did to something. And I think that level of support, whether it was something that happened at school or with our parents, was deeply satisfying. It did not take away, however, from the confusion about being adopted and what our story was like before and the circumstances around it. We also had a brother that was 2 years younger that was also adopted. And the three of us were a little pack. We had each other's back. I think there was an understanding that we came from the same place. It was the same orphanage. And even though we weren't biologically related, just to have those two siblings in the same environment was really very supportive.
That's really fascinating. You said you had a little pack. It sounds like it was the twins and the other adopted brother.
Correct.
Parents did a great job of not separating you, but you had a pack as adopted children. How did that play out in your family dynamics of you having a pack together and then there were the biological children?
The younger kids were a little bit more younger than us, 5 years difference between me and my parents' first biological child. And I think those age differences were part of it. Whenever we went out into the community, back then, I mean, my parents would open the door and say, go on out and play. We had a neighborhood park across the street, and we didn't come home until the street lights came on. The three oldest of us would watch out for each other. If we looked like there was something harmful or somebody was bullying one of us, we took care of it with each other. And certainly that happened later when the younger kids got a little bit older. But we were the first three. And I think my parents, because they had infertility issues for so many years in the early parts of their marriage, we knew what our place was in the family, and that was something very special to them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as you said it, I think what you were conveying is that as the adopted three, you were older and there was enough of an age difference that it created a natural pack anyway, that the
Correct.
age spread between your group and the natural born children's group would have created a natural pack among you anyway, even if you had
Correct.
all been natural in the family. I got you. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I want to just say I think we perceived our place in our family as being very secure before the next set came around.
That's really interesting. Tell me about twin life. It can be hard to separate twins from each other. Like literally, people can't tell you apart. And
Yeah.
if you have the same interests and you're going to the same activities throughout the community, it's very difficult to create your own identity as an individual. What kinds of things were you into, and what were some of the challenges of twin life in your community?
Well, I'll start with some of the successes part of it. We were both very shy and quiet. So to have this built-in person that was shadowing you through life was very supportive. My sister and I did a lot of the same things together when we were in grammar school. And then in high school, we started individuating from each other. She played volleyball, I played tennis. We had different activities, some different friend groups, although there was some overlap. Went to the same college, but we didn't room together, pledged
Mm.
different sororities. So there was this sense of we can go down the same path, parallel together, but we're going to branch off every now and then and do our own thing. And there was a lot of acceptance about that.
That's really cool. Are you part of any twin communities or anything? Do you go to twin events or anything like that?
No, we don't. She's still working, and I'm crazy busy with all my book stuff. So we don't, but we appear often together. She'll come to my book events and book clubs, and we'll talk about the stories together. This last book that I wrote, Twice the Family, I collaborated on a lot of the stories with her and with my mom to make sure that we all were on the same page.
Gotcha. What are some of the misconceptions about twins? And what are some of the things that are absolutely true that maybe people don't even realize?
We don't need to talk verbally. We can talk non-verbally with facial expressions, gestures.
That is
Often,
true, or that's a misconception?
no, that is very true. That does happen. There's a lot of nonverbal communication.
That's incredible.
Can we read each other's minds? Not really, but our reactions to things are the same. And I think that is something that people don't realize is that often I don't even have to look at her because I know she's exasperated or she's happy just as I am.
Is
We
that regardless of whether you're in the same room?
Exactly. It could be an email, what do you think we should do about this for mom? And I'll say something, and she said, that's what I think too. Our agreement on things is sometimes a little disarming to my younger siblings. And because we're the oldest, we're the bossy older sisters anyway. So
Yeah, right.
there is that. We do show up at social events wearing like the same pants and the same shoes. I
Not having coordinated previously.
no, no, and I do think it's a mood thing, and we just, share all those things, which is really funny. Misconceptions. See, I was reading a book about twins, and I was fascinated by the study. They studied twins that had been separated at birth and then were reunited later in life, and then twins that were reared together. And what they found was that the twins that were reared apart were more alike than twins that were reared together
Really?
because we individuate ourselves from each other, trying to be different to set ourselves apart from each other. Whereas the twins that are reared apart aren't trying. They marry a man named John, both of them. They both name their first son Henry. It's maybe a coincidence or just a matter of likes and dislikes.
That's incredible. So what I hear you saying is by being reared together, you can actually see one another and say, let me find the ways that I can be different. And you sort of repel, not in a negative way, but you just make an effort to find your individualism. Whereas an individual who is raised in a completely different family doesn't have that direct mirror in front of them and will just go with all of their innate feelings, such that they will basically do a lot of the same things that a twin their twin was doing. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was too. I've gotten to know five sets of twins, also adopted together through Catholic Charities, and we share a lot of the same reactions and events and experiences in our life. So we're an interesting subset. I don't think we've been studied yet, but and we're all twin girls, which is interesting too.
Interesting. Wow. Wait, when you say we were all, what do you mean?
The 5 sets of twins that I know that were adopted together are all females. They're not different sex twins
That's
or
fascinating.
fraternal twins. We're all identical.
So you know of a subset of the adoptee community that are twins who were adopted.
Correct.
That is so interesting. Yeah, I bet as you started writing, more and more twins started reaching out to you to say, "Hey, us too."
Yeah, and thank you, social media, for allowing those introductions to be made.
That's really incredible. Wow. Go back for a minute to your and Jenny's, for lack of better words, sort of fantasies or ideation about adoption and reunion and your biological parents. What kinds of things did you think? What did you
Um,
share?
Well, one of the big things was trying to make sense of our story. And so often, when we don't understand the facts, we make up a story to fit the facts. So we didn't have any information about our birth parents. And we decided, and this appeased us, that our birth mom they were in high school. So many were high school aged birth parents, that they were in high school. She was a cheerleader because we were doing cheerleading at the time. He was probably a football player. Their romance got carried away and they wanted to go to college and we were inconvenient. So because we were going off to college, all made sense to us. And this appeased us. We liked that. Our parents certainly didn't have any information. When I did find my birth parents, I couldn't have been more astounded at what the facts were. They had not any semblance to do with the little fantasy. And even as a 50-year-old adult, I still had trouble discounting that belief that I had come up with like
Yeah.
40 years before and assimilating reality.
That's fascinating. Wow. Really interesting. So, when did you and Jenny first start thinking you wanted to try to locate your biological family members? Do you remember any first serious conversation when you said, I kind of think we should do this? And who was first? Was it you or
Uh,
was it Jen?
Well, a couple of things. My parents, every so often when we were kids, would pull us into the living room and we called it the adoption chat, sort of a check in to see, did we have any questions? How were we feeling? Were we happy? And they would say, if you ever choose to search for your birth parents, we will help you. It put us on the spot. It was a very uncomfortable conversation for us. And one time, and I write about this in my book, my mom asked, "Are you happy?" Now, what is a child that is struggling with their own identity as a tween? How do you react to that? Well, you react that, no, we're fine, we are happy. And I think in general we were, but that uncomfortableness of that question, I think set the point, well, like, am I happy? Yes, I am, but I'm not happy enough. I want to have these facts about my identity. When we were becoming parents, my sister and I, we tried to get information from Catholic Charities. Because we were adopted in Illinois, the state adoption statutes had not changed. Catholic Charities sent us a letter and said nothing can be shared at this time. Fast forward a couple of decades, the laws did change and we started that process. I was the one that started the process because I was the one that had the health issues. And she did walk down that path with me, holding my hand. We consulted, but I did all the work. I often ask her, "Do you think you would have done this on your own?" And she said, "Probably not." It
Really?
was a lot of work. Certainly, I'm glad I waited till I was an adult. There were a lot of rejections and secondary rejections that I think a teenager, a tween, or even a young adult, they would have had to have years of therapy to get through some of the issues that presented themselves.
That's really fascinating. And you're right. It does take a level of maturity to be at a place where the things that you encountered are something that you can actually mull over, not and deal with in a mature fashion is what I'm trying to get to. That's really interesting. So, do you mind sharing what was the health issue that pushed you to the point of wanting or needing?
Share openly about this in my first book, Twice a Daughter. It was a breast biopsy, and it didn't amount to breast cancer, but it was a serious enough health scare that my husband insisted I try to find out what my background was. It coincided, interestingly enough, as things often do, with the state of Illinois changing their statutes and me being able to access my original birth record.
Oh, fascinating. I'm glad it didn't turn into anything more serious. So, Illinois has opened their records. What did you find in your records that you applied to get?
Well, that was obstacle number one. We did get the original birth record, but when a search agency was ready to help us, and they determined that she had used an alias, and that was what was on the birth record. Perfectly legal back then. Also problematic was that my birth father's name was not on there. Legally omitted is what it said.
Mm,
Also very legal back then. So that posed the question that we needed to another source. Again, lucky for us, the state of Illinois had instituted a new program called the Confidential Intermediary Service.
mhm.
And that meant that the judge opened our records, and Catholic Charities had to release all the information that was in there, including proper names. Our birth mom's name was in there. And very quickly, my intermediary found her and made contact, and we received our first rejection. She
Wow. Take me for a moment through this intermediary's first contact. So she says, "We found her," to you and your sister Jen. And I assume you grant her permission to make this first contact.
Yes, but
How did
her name was not shared with us, so we did not have any idea who she was or where she was. That was
Mm,
kept private until she gave her permission to release her name to my sister and I. So the
mm,
intermediary sent a letter to her and then received a reply back, and then the intermediary called me. So it was all very removed and very protected for both
mhm.
parties, which I suppose made it a lot easier for her to reject us.
What did her rejection letter say?
I do not want any contact with these individuals at this time.
Wow.
When the problem with that, of course, is that meant they couldn't go back to her and ask for medical history. I did have to get the judge involved, get my doctors to provide information about my situation, and he authorized another contact with her, which was out of the realm of what the program was doing at the time.
Yeah.
And she replied back with the medical history and then went radio silent again.
What did you think about her receptivity to providing you medical information, at least?
I believed that was probably all we were going to get from her. It also meant that I didn't have my birth father's name and I was only going to have half of my story. But the intermediary, who was also a social worker, counseled us, my sister and I, that often this is the first reaction because you don't know what the letter landed in the middle of, and that's over time she might soften. So she gave us some hope about that. I was also in a post adoption support group at that time through
Mm,
Catholic Charities. So getting a lot of counseling with the entire triad, birth mothers, other adoptees, and adoptive parents that were supporting their adult children through the reunion process. And that was also very educational to me, especially being in the same room with birth mothers to really understand, like Ann Fessler's book, The Girls That Went Away, what they were up against back then and the issues that they faced in making that contact with their birth son or daughter. That
mm.
helped so much for me to understand her and feel less angst or disappointed about the process. She did soften over time. It did take about 6 months. She called the intermediary and asked if there was something going on with my sister and I that they needed the medical history. And from there on, we started cards and letters and then in person meetings, and we're still in contact today. She's 92.
Is that right? Wow. What were those 6 months like, though, leading up to her reaching back? I mean, you've gotten this rejection letter, but then you've gotten medical information. So she hadn't slammed the door, and she said, "Not at this time," in that first letter, which I thought was interesting. How were those 6 months for you where you kind of got the information that you needed, but hadn't gotten the contact that you wanted?
Well, I grew up in a very Catholic family, so prayer and hope and that times will change was definitely part of my routine. And I did have that inner hope that she was going to change her mind. Honestly, because I'm a mother of four children, I couldn't imagine not wanting to have some contact with one of my children. And so I was drawing on that experience of being a mother myself and thinking she just needs time. She's going to come around because that's what a mother does. They do have to have some curiosity about the well being of their child, regardless of their own circumstances.
Yeah. So being a mother yourself, you had empathy for where she might be and a realization that if the tables were turned, you realized you couldn't see yourself not being in contact with one of your kids. Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. So then tell me about this moment that you hear that she has reached out and is interested in your health. How did that hit you?
Well, that was kind of a ridiculous scene, which I do write about in the book. I was sitting in the Target parking lot with one of my children having just done school supply shopping, and I got the call from the intermediary that she had just gotten off the phone with my birth mom and she wanted to initiate contact. So it's one of those movie-like moments that you don't have any trouble remembering where you were and what you were doing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Is that a tear-filled moment for you?
No, the big tearful moment was actually seeing her in person and that first hug, watching her hand gestures, similarities and differences between my sister and I. 5 decades of wondering what her voice is going to sound like, what she looks like, how she is. That was a big tearful moment.
I can imagine. But let's rewind for a moment because you still got to communicate with Jen that the intermediary has called you and said that your birth mother wants to meet you. How does this or wants to be in contact? How did you and Jen talk about this revelation?
Well, obviously she was my first phone call and she reacted the way I did, but maybe
Natural.
more reticent, I would say, cautious because she wasn't as active as I was in the search. She was sitting back saying, "Let's be careful with this. Let's just see how this goes." So, and that again is part of the relationship of twins. It's often a passenger driver situation where one is in charge and the other is letting the other one drive, and then you have the role reversal. So that yin and yang between us was definitely present during the adoption search.
That's interesting. And so that's true across, just to sidebar for a quick second. That's true across situations where one of you is the driver in a situation, but in an alternate situation, the other might be the driver. That's
Correct. And
that's
we
fascinating.
willingly give up the reins. We're having
Uh-huh.
health issues with our adoptive mom right now. And there's things that she said, I got this. And I back off. I don't get involved. I know she has it and I will take care of something else.
That's so interesting. This twin dynamic is absolutely fascinating, as I'm sure you can imagine, having probably spoken with so many people about the phenomena. So lead me into this moment of your first conversation. I assume you didn't just show up and meet each other for the first time. You probably exchanged some correspondence and then maybe got on the phone. What was your first interaction with her where you heard her voice or saw her face before the meeting?
I was so surprised at the pictures that she sent to us of her as a young person, the resemblance to us. The other thing that was astounding, back then in 1950s and 60s, Catholic Charities matched adoptees into their adoptive families based on what they looked like. So I had always grown up with people saying, "Oh, you look so much like your mom." And inside, I think, no, I don't. Of course, I can't. I'm not biologically related to her. So I had that negativity about that comment. When I looked at these pictures of my birth mom and realized not only did I look like her, how much she looked like my adoptive mom at the same
Wow,
age.
that's
So I had
cool.
a different reaction following that about looking like my mom. My brother that was adopted 2 years after us looks a lot like my adoptive dad did. And we should talk about that for a second. The reason why Catholic Charities did that back in the 50s and 60s is so that you looked like you fit in. And it goes to
Mm.
that stigma of what is an adopted child back in that era. They are illegitimate, they're from a poor family, they're from some troubled situation that they would be placed outside of the family. And so to minimize that, if you looked like the family in which you're placed, that stigma is not so great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They were assisting the assimilation, at least for judging the book by its cover kind of purposes.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Fascinating. Huh. So you see her photos from her letters, and you now see that both you and Jen look like her, and you, Julie, also can see that you resembled your adoptive mother, and your adoptive mother and biological mother kind of resemble each other. You can see this triangulation of how Catholic Charities was attempting to make this work visually at the very least. What was your first actual discussion with her?
The intermediary set up a time that I knew my birth mom was going to call me. And in that very first conversation, you can imagine what my first question was. Who is my birth father? That was eating me up alive because I wanted to have that side of my history. And she didn't hesitate. She was a little, I think, taken aback. That was one of the first things I said. And she gave me a name, but she hesitated over the spelling. And I can still hear that conversation because as it came to turn out, she gave me a version of his name, but not the exact name, which meant it was a little harder to find him and
Mm.
took more time. More experts had to be called in to close the loop on the story.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just to stay with that point for a moment, and then I'm going to go back. Did you get the sense that was intentional, a mislead, or did you get the sense that there was just bad memory? It had been, 40 years.
The story I told myself was that it was bad memory, maybe a tough memory where she didn't want to pull that fact out.
Yeah.
That was the story I told myself, and I stuck with that until I came to find out otherwise.
Oh, I'm looking forward to hearing that. Were you and Jen on the phone at the same time with her?
No, she had her own time set up with her.
Oh.
I don't know how far along you are with your reunion journey, but we often draw the example that it's like a new romance. You know, you've got those nervous questions and you're willing to hear the story, but you're ready with your next question. And so there was a lot of nervousness on both parts. I took copious notes and have gone back to those notes many times
Yeah.
to try to remember exactly what happened.
Yeah, I am so glad to hear you make that analogy to romance because I have said it so many times and I can't remember anybody else saying it. But when I first found my birth mother, this is exactly how I described it to people. It was like falling in love with someone because this is someone that you're so interested in. You want to know everything about them. You've got questions. You want to know when you're going to see them, how it's going to go. It just feels like similar butterflies to a romance, as you've said. So I'm glad to hear you corroborate what I've always said about it, that it feels a bit like falling in love.
And that first stage of reunion, as you know, is called the honeymoon period, where you're not looking for any negativity about this person at all. You're only seeing the positivity. And then the bubble bursts a little bit. Those imperfections come out, and you see some cracks in the armor, and you at first don't want to believe it, and then you do believe it. And that's when the real relationship challenges start, is to
Yeah.
figure out boundaries and tolerations and all the relationship things.
Did Jen convey to you, so keeping in mind Jen is more reticent and cautious in this, she has her own individual time set up to speak with your birth mother. I make the assumption that she went into it with that reticence and protective caution for herself. How did you guys compare notes as to how your conversations went?
We did obviously talk about it that same night after her conversations. We had the same reaction, the excitement about finally making contact with this person that you've wondered about your whole life. We were both excited about making the next step, what was an in-person reunion and how that was going to go down.
So what did you do? How did it go down?
We ended up traveling to where our birth mom was in a different state and met with she and her husband. She hadn't gotten married until she was in her late 40s, which means I don't have any other siblings from that side of the family. And we brought our husbands with us and really just had a very blissful weekend, just like first dates, had a really good time. And from that, more conversations and phone calls and more meetings. The most beautiful moment was having her come to visit us in Chicago, meet her grandchildren. Can you imagine not ever been being able to recognize the fact that you're a mother, but also that you've got this whole slew of grandchildren from your two daughters. So that was a beautiful moment, having her in our homes and meeting our kids, and the
Um,
circle was complete.
yeah. How many children does Jen have?
She has two and I have four. So between
So
us, there's six.
she 6 grandkids just
Yeah,
like that.
just
Oh
like
my gosh. How did she do? How was it for you to watch that interaction? Both for you to have her in your home, but for you to see her become a grandmother before your eyes.
I think we were all overcome with emotion, and certainly some of the granddaughters resembled her in more like attitudes and gestures than others. What has been interesting going forward is some of the things that she experienced growing up. She's one of 13. She had seven brothers. And so our two sons, Jen's son and my son, they're very physical, big guys, very athletic. And some of her brothers resembled them. My nephew, Jen's son, played college baseball, and my birth mom's brothers were also very big baseball players. So there was a lot of synchronicities, which was really fun to explore at that time.
That's insane. It's so interesting to me, this genetic linkage between grands. The grandkids tend to look like the grandparents. It's so fascinating. My son Seth, he looks so much like my birth mother. It's astonishing. It's really, really cool to see.
Yeah.
So, you have expressed that one of your major curiosities was about your birth father, and you've received a name, you've started the search, but it's challenging because you've gotten a name that is not spelled correctly, be it intentional or an intentional misdirection. What is your next step in searching for this person?
Well, I went to my trusted intermediary and started that whole process all over again with applying and getting the judge to agree and all of that. And the rigors of the program are that you only have a year. We got an extension because it looked like we were making progress. But in the end, he could not be found with this name that we had been given, and the case was dismissed. I was sharing all this with both my adoptive parents and also my birth mom, and she was just fine. She was going along with it. She never once corrected herself, which is interesting in retrospect. She really intended for that little, I'm going to call it a lie, to sit there and be what it was. As often happens, because you've been down this road before, you're not giving up. You're researching, you're trying every angle known to man. And I landed on an angle that paid off, which was hiring a genealogist in the town where my parents met. And that lady turned out to be an adoptee. She
Wow.
was very attuned with how to work the system, the city records. She had the fire in her belly from her own experience. And she literally combed the records and came back to me within a couple weeks and said, "You don't have the right name. I think it's this guy." And it was a variation of the name that my birth mom gave me, but enough to throw us off. She came up with contact information, and very quickly I sent him a letter and asked for his help. We had come to find out was that breast cancer ran in his family. And that
Oh,
put the coitus on all of us to figure out DNA wise, first, was he really our birth father? But also, how closely aligned were we? And my doctors were wanting some more gene testing to see if the breast cancer gene was the BRCA gene. And it wasn't, but my birth father's sister, my aunt, had died of breast cancer before she was 40. So we were back in serious territory, which is where we had started the story. And he refused to do the DNA testing, but he did provide the medical history. And that is kind of the happy ending of the story in the sense that he passed on the information to my half brother and sister that you have two sisters. I didn't know you had two sisters. I
I
knew
was
there
going
was
to
one.
ask.
'Cause I love this phrase, gotten a girl in trouble when I was younger, because that's how they
Mm,
phrased it. And my brother was the one that reached out to me, and we discovered a strange synchronicity between the two of us, that I had probably met him, that our paths were on the same parallel trajectory. And then he did the DNA testing and we passed. We had a 98% match, which
is
was
that right? Wow.
astounding.
That is really interesting. Huh. What was the synchronicity that you discovered?
My family had a summer cottage in Michigan that we would go to on the weekends. And the family next door would be in and out of our cottage for sugar and eggs and that kind of thing. They had four daughters, and my brother was married to one of those girls.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. Are you
Yeah.
serious?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Wow, that must have been really wild for you to be reconnected with this woman that you knew as a child, and she is married to your biological brother whom you just found.
And my parents knew him.
Insane.
My parents knew him. My brothers and sisters I grew up with knew him. And when everybody figured out that he was our biological brother, it was like this beautiful reunion and just wonderful. He's become a best friend. He's a wonderful guy, and I'm
That-
really happy to have found him.
What did he say about finding biological twin sisters?
He said that he was always very comfortable having older sisters. Share the same sense of humor, so he said, "Yeah, I love that you guys get me."
That's really cool. That's really cool. I want to go back for a moment to something you said about the phrase, "I got a girl in trouble." There's such a passive nature to it that it sounds so glancing, like if you were driving a car and you had a fender bender, right? It's oops, this thing happened. When in
Yeah.
fact, the creation of a life, let alone two twin lives, is a big deal, right? The trajectory of your birth mother's life changed significantly from this minor fender bender that he has expressed. How does it sit with you when people say this, "I got a girl in trouble"? What do you think of?
I love bringing that up because that's part of what the society was doing back then. It was considered that he could go off on his merry way and lead his life the way he wanted to and not take responsibility for it. That it really, the onus was on her to take care of this problem. And that's how society looked at it back then. She was viewed as having amoral behavior. It was shed light on her upbringing and her family, and certainly that shame became part of the experience of being a birth mom. He, on the other hand, felt that he could just go off and lead his merry life, that he was off the hook.
Yeah. I'm glad you raised that because I don't think that gets a lot of attention. It's well known. We just don't talk about it much. So I appreciate you raising that piece. So your birth father never took the DNA test, but it sounds like he admitted that he had been with your birth mother because he told his kids and you guys did a DNA. How is your relationship with him then?
He had remarried a second time. It's kind of a complicated story, but my brother didn't have a great relationship either with the new marriage that my birth father had embarked upon. And so nobody really pressed the issue. He did not really want to complicate his life anymore. My brother was working on trying to make some kind of connection with us, and then my birth father died suddenly of a heart attack.
Oh,
So
no.
I never did get to meet him. One of the interesting facts, because we were talking about that biological passing on of genes and athleticism, my birth father played college football, and my son at that time was playing college football. And when I got hold of my birth father's picture from a yearbook from college, they looked so similar as to be frightening. I
Yeah.
thought that fact alone might have swayed my birth father in wanting to meet me and my kids, but it didn't. And I think
Hmm.
so that is the caution that we have to make with other adoptees that are entering this process is, and this was portrayed to me through many social workers, we don't know what we're walking into. And I think that holds a lot of adoptees back from going down this search and reunion process. We don't know what we're walking into. We don't know how disruptive our questions and our contact are going to be with those folks. And I think I went into the situation glossy and unrealistic in that I thought they would open their arms to find us and to have us in their lives. Well, their lives were too complicated. It really didn't have that much to do with me, more to do with their lives and their relationships. And so I love to caution adoptees about this. Be careful. It's going to take a while. They've got things they have to work through. Certainly, my birth mom did work through those issues to accept us to be in her life. And it takes time. And that's the beauty of having counseling and social workers help you through the process. They certainly can make it easier and you gain more understanding about where they're coming from.
Yeah, agree 100%. I can't help wondering, you mentioned earlier that there's a honeymoon period in reunion, that things go great. And then you start to really get to know the person. You start digging deeper into some of the issues, asking some more challenging questions. Tell me about the aftermath of the honeymoon period with your birth mother.
Well, this was one of the first issues was the name for my birth father. I did confront her, which was a very difficult conversation to ask her. I said, I have found my birth father. And we had quite an argument about this because she admitted that she'd given me the wrong name on purpose. And she was angry that I'd found him. In talking with her about it, it came out that she was very fearful about having him anywhere back in her life, that she'd gone through a lot of counseling to deal with all the issues she faced in the situation. And I assured her that my relationship with him would be completely separate, that she would not have him in her life. And I do respect that about her. I don't think she should have lied to me and given me the wrong name, but I think she emotionally did that when I caught her off guard with the question, the very first
Yeah.
conversation.
I'm glad you said this piece about her not necessarily wanting to have him in her life because, and you also said that you caught her off guard. I'm a believer in trying to plan the conversation as much as possible. And I think about this more in as an adoptive parent, you need to plan for what your reaction is going to be when your adoptive child says, I think I'd like to search, so that you don't get cut out of their search process because you have responded in a way that you hadn't practiced. And now you've said the wrong thing and you find yourself on the outside. So to liken this to your situation here, and I make no judgment about how you approach this, but you did say you caught her off guard. I could see how an adoptee in a situation where they want to talk to their birth mother about finding their birth father could take the tack of saying, what is his name? And I recognize this could be tough for you. So if you want to be in contact with him, should I find him? I appreciate that. And if you don't, I will totally respect that. Sort of setting that position for her to say, I don't want anything to do with him, or thank you for that. I wouldn't mind talking to him one more time. So it's interesting to hear you say that she felt caught off guard and potentially told a lie in the moment, but also probably didn't want to know him. These are complicated situations. Really interesting.
They are. And in retrospect, I think you're entirely correct. I should have been more direct with her about it. I just figured she assumed by giving her name, his name, that I was going down that path. You bring up a really important point. I caught my adoptive parents off guard with this search. The breast biopsy was the one that instigated it. And just out of the blue, at 50 years old, I went to my parents and asked for my adoption papers. Why they didn't give them to me before then, I'm not sure. With I'm going to go down this path. And I caught both of them off guard. My adoptive mom did not react well to that. Hence, a lot of the conflict that I share in the book, Twice a Daughter, is about the mother daughter relationship suffering because of my need to have that medical history. Certainly, as a character in the book, she goes through a lot of transformation, and in the end, all of that is resolved. Mostly because we knew my brother. My half brother was like right next door.
He smoothed the whole thing over for you
Oh,
guys.
he did.
That's really wonderful. I'm really glad to hear that. So, had you started to see signs that she was coming around before your brother was discovered? Was she getting used to the idea that you were attempting and had made reunion contact?
Maybe. She wasn't asking any questions, and I think that was disturbing to me that she had no curiosity about it. Also, on her behalf, there was fear. She did not really understand what her role was going to be. I think she feared that the mother role that she so treasured was being jeopardized by this other woman coming into the picture. My argument with her was always, my goodness, we've had a 50-year relationship. How can you think that this is going to change anything? And it did put a lot of pressure on me to show that our relationship on from my behalf was not going to change. I wasn't going to call this person mom. That was her title. I was going to call this person by her first name. Over time, now both ladies are 92 years old. They're both the same age, which again is that Catholic Charities thing about matching you in a situation that's similar to where you originated. And my mom now at this point will say, "How's your birth mom? Have you talked to her?" But it's taken a long time and a lot of work.
Yeah. The whole thing is a lot of work. Wow. Jeez, Julie. I'm so appreciative of you taking time to share every piece of your journey with us. Thank you so much. In terms of your books, you've mentioned that you've written more than one. You got one that is their most recent one. So, what
Yeah,
are the names of your books?
Twice a Daughter is the search memoir. It's about the 5-year search that my sister and I undertook to find our birth relatives. And speaking about the book over the last 4 years, so many people had questions about what was it like to be an identical twin, adopted in this blended family. And so this book that just came out, Twice the Family, is about the coming of age story of my family, all the ups and downs of a big family, of family building through infertility and special needs sister and crises. So it is that story that adds color to the first book. They're meant to stand alone. You can read them out of order. And it was a really fun project to embark on because like I said earlier, I worked on some of the chapters with my twin sister and with my mom. So it truly is more of a family history than it started out to be.
That's amazing, Julie. Thank you so much for your hard work to write down these unique stories. This is part of what we need is more people writing down their journey, being on podcasts like these and getting these stories out so that people understand the depth and the breadth of what the adoption and reunion experience is. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it, Julie.
Thank you for exposing all the stories. It's really a deep benefit to so many people.
I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much. Hey, it's me. Julie's journey reminds us that reunion is rarely a straight line. Her journey began with health questions, and her birth mother's initial rejection could have been the end of the story. Julie waited, hoped, and prayed until her first mother finally softened and reached out to make sure her twins were okay. Julie pieced together the puzzle of her birth father's identity, and as a result, she offers a word of caution to other adoptees. We don't know what we're walking into with an adoption reunion attempt that might stir up complications in the lives of our birth families. We have to approach with empathy and with our eyes wide open. I'm Damon Davis, and I hope you found something in Julie's journey that inspired you, validates your feelings about wanting to search, or motivates you to have the strength along your journey to learn, who am I really? And don't forget, if you're interested in the new book about the experiences inside the life of an adoptee, go to theadopteeexperience.com.